Welcome to The Writer's Dream, where we talk about books and authors. Our show can be seen on YouTube. Just search my name, which is Linda Maria Frank. I'm the author of Annie Tillery Mysteries. Click on my picture and my videos will come up. I've interviewed about 150 different authors, and you will get some very good ideas about reading and writing, and find some very good books, especially by local authors. It's amazing how many authors there are here on Long Island. You can also see us here at the studio website, which is ltveh.org. Just go through all the computer prompts to find video on demand, and just look for The Writer's Dream. I have a Facebook page called The Writer's Dream. If you want to be on the show or have a question for me, please message me through the Facebook page. Today's guest is Nancy J. Azzaro, and she is a girl from Brooklyn with quite a story. Everyone I know from Brooklyn has a story, so Nancy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, and I loved Brooklyn so much. My husband and I moved a couple of times, and we once moved to Staten Island, and I said, no, I have to get back to Brooklyn. So I was lucky enough we were lucky enough to find a house in Brooklyn, back in Brooklyn, and I raised my children there. And so I have a great affinity for Brooklyn. It's a beautiful place, great diversity, great food, and it's a very vibrant place.
Yeah, I've always found that about Brooklyn, too. I'm a Queens girl myself, and when I grew up in Queens, it was like a farm community, for God's sake, compared to Brooklyn. But my father always would tell me that Brooklyn was a city of its own at one time. It was not part of New York City, and it was called a city of churches, yes. Which leads us pretty much into your book. So, your book, The Vision of Christ in St. Columba Church in Brooklyn, tell us about it.
Well, I've had this story in me for a very long time, over 25 years. I didn't know if I would ever tell the story because it gave me some apprehension. Because it's a very personal story about a private revelation that I had many years ago when I was a young mother raising my children in Brooklyn. I was very faithful. I was a catechist in the church, and I would go to church on Sundays, but I wasn't overly religious because I just didn't have the time as a mother. But what I tell about in the book is that one evening at a Catholic charismatic prayer group, we would meet on Friday evenings, and one Friday evening, which was similar to all the other Friday evenings, but I was praying along with everyone else and singing, and I had a vision of Christ in that church above the altar. There's a beautiful statue, wooden statue, of the risen Christ in that church. And he just appeared in front of it, and he was just there, and I was, as I describe in the book, I was unable to move. I was sort of transfixed or overawed, as they would say. And what was remarkable about this vision was the humility that I saw. That struck me the most out of anything that was streaming from Christ's face. And so it was remarkable that sort of captivated me. I mean, he was also dressed very beautifully, royally, in this ivory color, long vestment or gown. He also had a beautiful headdress on, which was the similar fabric. And so in any event, it changed my life. But I was very apprehensive to tell anyone this because, you know, people have had mystical experiences.
People are skeptical.
Yes, people are skeptical, and I'm skeptical myself. You know, that's just the kind of person I am. You know, I've gone to school, I have a lot of education, and I tend to be skeptical in some areas as well. So I didn't want to tell anyone because I was afraid that people would judge me. And so I basically just kept the story inside. But I started writing down bits and pieces of it because I didn't want to forget it. So over the years, but I never knew or never thought that I would actually publish it. So that's what I kept doing. I kept thinking about it. And then
Yeah,
It's
what
a-
tipped you over the edge to make you publish it?
I was getting older.
Oh, there we
I
go.
was starting to get older, and I said, you know what? It's going to be now or never, because, you know, none of us know how long our lives are going to be. And I thought that, you know, even if I touched some people, I wanted to give people hope. I think that's very important. That's a part of Christianity. We're people of hope. We believe in the resurrection. And so I wanted to give people hope that what I experienced, what I believed was the truth, I wanted to give people, encourage their faith.
Let me ask you this question. What do you think was going on in your life? At this point, you're a mom. You've already graduated from college?
Yes, I've already graduated. I have my BS. I had a Bachelor of Science in Education and Psychology. I didn't have a master's yet.
Okay, so you're well educated, and you're a mother involved in probably, I don't know how old your kids were, but probably in the community because of school and whatnot. So you're a pretty grounded person, right? It isn't that you're like, you know, a person who is very hysterical, let's put it that way. Let's use blunt language. You're a grounded person. What do you think was going on in your life that Christ would appear to you?
Well, as I said, I thought that I was living a normal life, right? I was
Sure sounds like it.
right. I was a churchgoer. I was a catechist for many years. That's a teacher of religion, a volunteer
I'm
in my
Catholic too.
parish. So I was doing that. I read the Bible and was part of this Catholic charismatic prayer group, which is, you know, the charismatic movement in the church. It encourages people to sing loudly, praise, clap their hands, and I'm not sure if that had anything to do with it being a part of that movement, but I'm not really sure. But as I researched this, so then what happened is after the experience, I wanted to know more about mysticism. Mysticism is a fascinating topic.
What is mysticism? I mean, there's so many myths about mysticism.
Right. Well, the
What
word
is
comes
mysticism?
from the word mystery. And so mysticism, I'm just going to give a few short definitions because it's fascinating. Father Johnson states, mysticism is wisdom or knowledge that is found through love. It is loving knowledge, which is beautiful. Also, it comes from the Greek root, and it means mystery. A traditional definition is experiential knowledge of God, having an experience of God, or the direct experience of God's presence. St. Thomas Aquinas defined mysticism, or contemplation, as a simple gaze on God and divine things proceeding from love. So basically, it's an experience of God, a direct experience. And so what I wound up doing is I decided to enroll in Fordham University's satellite program. At the time, they had a program to get a master's in religious education at Bishop Kearney High School in Brooklyn. And that was near to where I lived. So it seems like it was just everything was setting up for me because I would have never traveled to Manhattan or the Bronx. I just didn't have the time. But Fordham had this program in Brooklyn, a half hour from my house, and I started taking courses towards my master's degree with the intent that I was going to somehow study mysticism. So I took all the courses I had to, but then my final paper, you had to write a very large, in-depth paper to get your master's degree, and I did it on mysticism. And so I learned that many saints, many holy people, have had mystical experiences. But also, there are common people that have mystical experiences as well. And they're afraid to talk about it, just like I was afraid to talk about it. So they don't want to be labeled or judged. So it might be just something they're sitting in a church and they get an overwhelming feeling of being loved or being cared for. So it doesn't have to be extraordinary mystical phenomena. Extraordinary mystical phenomena would be visions, locutions, the stigmata. You know, those are really the extraordinary things that have happened to some of the great saints, like St. Padre Pio or St. Teresa of Avila, St. Catherine of Siena. So they've had these amazing, St. Faustina, these who would speak with Jesus like he was a friend. So these saints have had this extraordinary phenomena. But then there's just everyday people who feel that God is with them at certain points of their life, that God is helping them get through a crisis. So there's all levels of this mysticism.
Yeah, I think anyway that this is the beauty of meditation, because if I really feel like, from my own personal experience, that if I just go someplace and I'm quiet and I'm just, daydreaming, thinking or whatever, I feel a oneness with the universe. I call it the universe speaking to me. I don't talk about God speaking to me because I'm too humble for that. God speaks to me and it's going to scare me. So I think in terms of the universe speaking to me. And I don't know, maybe that is a mystical experience. It sure feels good. I have to tell you that.
Well, that is, of course, that's a form of mystical experience. And I often encourage people, and I've heard priests encourage this as well, that you should go into a church when it's empty and just sit there.
Yeah.
And you get graces just from being in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, but it's also very peaceful, or sitting in front of the Blessed Sacrament. So all of that is good, but you have experienced it then. And that's what I'm saying, is that it's experienced more than people realize. There are different levels of it and different types of it. But yes, that piece of meditation or contemplation when you're sitting in a church, or even meditating at home.
Yeah. See, now you had a vision, so you saw Christ and you recognized him as Christ. But I'm going to give you another example and see what you have to say about it. In Al-Anon and 12-step programs, they talk about a higher power. They never call it God, and they don't affiliate with any religion, but they call it a higher power. And the higher power can be God, but the higher power can also be the strength or spirit of the group. In other words, when you're going to an AA meeting and you're sitting there and you're discussing those things that are important to you, that the group itself creates an energy. Let's put it that way. It's almost like, and I don't want to bring this down to movie level, but it's like the force be with you. So what do you think of that? That when people, communicate with one another on that level, is that mysticism? Are they getting a mystical experience?
No, I think that there's a certain energy when you have a group that meets and they have a common bond, and they're trying to achieve something, like in Alcoholics Anonymous. But I think what I'm talking about is a little different, because there would be a God, there would be a supreme being, whatever you call God, but there would have to be, I think, God. I think that's the feeling that I have.
No, I think in AA they just really try to reach out to everybody, whether they believe in God or not.
Right,
so they call it that
good.
energy.
Right, and that's fine. I think that's fine, and if it's helpful.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
Yes, yeah, I know it's helped people.
Okay, so you said you wanted to read some passages from your book?
Yes, I would like to. I'd like to read a little bit about growing up in a two-family house in Brooklyn with our extended family. And we had, my family wants me to write a book just about that, about all the experiences we had in that house, because it was quite a household. But I'm going to read a couple of passages. Growing up in a large Italian-American household was not only nurturing, but it was a feast for the mind and the body as well. My Aunt Connie was an excellent cook, as was my mother. There was always delicious food in that house on East 52nd Street. There were also plenty of people to eat it. Joy and Esther, who were older and lived upstairs from us, had many friends. They were both popular, who visited often day and night. Both families had friends and relatives from other parts of Brooklyn who visited as well, and we had great friendships with many of our neighbors. The food that was served to our family and guests was mouth-watering: eggplant and chicken parmesan, lasagna, stuffed peppers, rice balls, chicken spadinas, potatoes and eggs, macaroni and meatballs, stuffed artichokes, and also what are known as Italian peasant dishes: pasta fazool, beans and escarole, chickpeas and rice. We were told as children that Italian Americans ate peasant dishes during the Great Depression, since they were inexpensive, nutritious, and delicious. Italian families continued to eat them even when economic times improved. Macaroni with homemade tomato sauce could be stretched, so it was cooked often in case people dropped by. There was always enough food. Traditionally, in Italian homes, if someone stopped by at mealtime, you fed them. That is why peasant dishes and pasta were an important component of meals. They could feed a lot of people and unexpected guests. When I was older and going to college, A psychology professor said in Psych 1 that food is love. I knew that was true from personal experience, from growing up in an extended Italian-American household. All of these experiences helped to form me.
Sounds good.
I made you hungry, right?
I was Italian for 18 years, and my mother-in-law was a very good cook, and she taught me. Actually, she didn't teach me how to cook Italian food. I think she wanted to keep her recipes secret so that her son would always go for her meatballs. And I have to say, she made the best meatballs. My son, our grandson, says that actually he knows her secret, but he has yet to make me a meatball. And so I'm waiting for this meatball. I have some questions, actually technical questions. Chapter 4 is called The Vision Theophany. What's that?
Theophany is when God becomes present. Like God's presence is a theophany.
Okay, so when you had the vision, but you kept it quiet. In a quiet period, okay, how did it change your life?
Well,
Before you started to write about it.
Right. Well, I became more religious, obviously. I'm not sure why I had it. Someone asked me that question recently. Why do you think Jesus appeared to you? And I don't know the answer to that. But I do know that it changed my life. And so, as I said, I went for a master's degree in religious education, and a lot of people questioned that decision. They said, why aren't you getting a master's in education? Because I had been an early childhood teacher, and I taught high school for a year. And I said, I'm just drawn to this. I feel drawn to religion and to know more about it. And so it affected me in that way, that I put my energy, my time, and my money into getting this master's degree from Fordham University.
And you also used the master's degree, right, to get involved in Christian education, Catholic education?
Yes, I did. And then as my children grew up, I went back to work, and I was the director of religious education for 10 years. And yes, I've given retreats, I've given lectures, and I'm still doing work in my parish. So yes, I did use it, and I had no regrets that I ever did it. I learned so much, and I continue to learn. I believe in adult learning, so I'm still learning, and I think it's very important. I'm always reading, and I could never know enough, So, but I'm going to read a little bit from chapter 4, the Theophany. Many mystical theologians and saints, such as St. Augustine, believed and stressed in their writings that a vision of Christ in the earthly life was possible. St. Augustine wrote, I have sought my God in order not only to believe, but also, if possible, to see something of him. He stressed that any vision of the presence of the face of God would be fleeting. With the fine point of the mind, we were able to gaze upon something unchangeable, although hastily and in part. And then I go on to talk about all the saints that have had visions, like St. Paul, who was very unworthy. He was hunting Christians when he had a mystical experience of Jesus. The great women saints, who I just love, St. Teresa of Avila, St. Catherine of Siena, St. Catherine of Genoa. So there are mystical women saints, I always admired them and their writings. So it changed me in that I definitely became a seeker. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know about mysticism, about other people's experiences. I was always trying to figure out, like, how could this have happened to me? I didn't fully understand why this would happen, why God would choose me in this way. But the more I researched and the more I learned, I realized that God can do whatever God wants.
I guess so. It's good to be the God, right?
And God doesn't need our approval, and so that made me feel good. I didn't need credentials. I didn't need anything. It's just for some reason God decided on that Friday evening to appear to me. And so I'm happy that I finally told the story, even though I'm still apprehensive. And this is my first TV interview, but I'm happy that I did it because I believe that it was meant to be done, and that I should have, I should have done it.
Okay, so you do these talks, and you've been involved in religious education. Now you've written a book, and you've explained the experience. Have people come to you with their stories? Have they opened up to you? Or?
Yes, that has happened. Nothing extraordinary like what the vision, but people have said similar to what you have said, that they've been sitting in church and all of a sudden they were surrounded by love and peace, and they felt that it was coming from God. And you'll hear other people tell the stories other than the ones that I heard. But yes, it does open up people to start talking about things like this.
Yeah. Well, I find it fascinating because I studied science at a Catholic university, and I believe in science, but I believe that science is a manifestation of nature, which was created by God, and so I'm always trying to reconcile all of this stuff, and it's a very interesting topic to me. It does not give me angst or upsetment. It only upsets me when people try to separate nature from God, from science and whatnot, because it's all one to me. But it's been an interesting field of study, so to speak. So what do you like best about Christ?
Well, as I say in the book, the humility of Christ, and I think that is what has always drawn people to Christ, is his compassion, his love of all people, his non-judgmental attitude. And this is why he continues into the 21st century, drawing people to him. And it's because of that, because his message was timeless. His message of caring for the less fortunate, sharing what you have, giving of yourself, helping the poor, the marginalized. And he did it. He acted it out in his life. So this is it's a teaching that people are drawn to.
Yeah.
Of all
Goodness.
Economic levels.
Kindness,
just pure
mercy.
kindness, pure mercy, exactly, pure goodness, truth. I feel like I glimpsed truth. I was in the presence of truth. And the fact that there was humility, I think I could never have thought this up. I mean, because the humility that was coming from his face, but yet he was dressed so regally. So that was incongruent to me in a way, because someone who's like a king or a high priest, or it was someone who would be dressed like that, would not have that humble look on their face. That's what struck me. It was and again, your mind, when you're having a mystical experiences, your mind is not able to process it.
Yeah, you have to think about it later.
You have to think about it later, because at the time you just, your mind is, as I said, overawed.
But isn't that the draw of this present Pope, that he is the Pope, but he really comes across as humble?
Yes.
And I think of all the popes in my lifetime, he is the one who has the real message of Christ: mercy, kindness. And God knows today that is a message that really, really, really we need, I think. I feel that. And I feel that many, many people are carrying out that message under great duress. So, yeah. It's a message and that's a thing that a lot of people say. They say, well, there's a message of Christ, but why does God allow wars and disease and pestilence and your best friend dying and all that? They blame it on God. How do you answer that?
We live in a fallen world. That's what we're taught, that this is a fallen world, and that we will not truly ever understand that this side of heaven. There's a great scientist, I don't know if you know of him, scientist, priest, Teilhard de Chardin.
Yes.
Have you ever heard of him? And he has an amazing story. But what he said, and I love this, is that we are all being pulled towards Christ. But that, where we are now, we can't see the fulfillment. We're just in a certain time of history. So all will be revealed in time. But that, that we're all being pulled towards fulfillment in Christ. I just think that is beautiful when I read that in his writings. So, I certainly don't have the answer to that. No theologian has the answer to that, But we do live in this fallen world, but we do have the capacity for goodness and for kindness. And we all have the ability to change the world in little ways, just in our own communities. And so I see young people really, doing that, becoming activists, You even see what's happening with the climate
Oh,
and
Greta.
all the active
Greta Thunberg?
Yes.
Yes.
Who my son recently told me about. I have young adult sons. But yes, so the young people, I think, are really starting to see that they need to become involved and they need to help to change the world.
I saw after 9/11, there was a show on PBS, and it was about this whole idea of God being involved in a terrible tragedy, the 9/11 terrorist attacks here. And the Catholic priest, his answer to it was, how do you explain how God allows this to happen? And his explanation, I thought, was really pretty cool. He said that every horrible act that mankind can produce can generate thousands and thousands of good acts from people.
Right.
And that's actually what did happen. Not that it erased the horrible
No.
act, but it gives, as you were saying, gives the opportunity to do something really, really good. So we have about a minute left, and
Okay.
what I would like you to do is whatever you want to do. If you
Okay.
want to do a reading,
Yes,
do
I just
that.
would like to read a little bit about the vision. Quickly, let's see. The following insights into the vision, the details that I would describe that I was able to recall after the experience. What I reflected upon afterwards. Oh, he's dressed like a king. This is a vision of Christ. This is the true likeness of Christ. It wasn't like that at all. No thoughts at all, none. I was totally immersed in the present moment, in those moments, in the now of time. It could not be any other way. What emanated was so striking was humility, emanated from the face of Christ, which was a transcendent humility. It was not like any humble face I had ever seen. It was different. It poured forth in a gentle, unassuming way. It was a noble, divine humility. Christ was dressed as a king, or as I would imagine a high priest would dress. He was dressed nobly.
That's wonderful. So, does it make you feel really special?
No, as I said, it was a two-edged sword. And a two-edged sword can help or it can hurt, right? So, but I am grateful. I feel blessed.
Good. We're actually done.